talk into the microphone, though.
Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order, and then we will turn the floor over to the over in a few minutes. So, we're going to call order the flag salute, please.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please stand for a moment of silence. I go to this roll call, let me, public meeting notice, and then we'll turn the floor over to that. In accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act, notices being in your front advisory posted on the whole before the minutes of the relevant cases made to the suburban things. Roll call, Warren. Here. Benning, Steve Frager. Here. Patrick Rose. Beth Shaw. Here. Eric Devine. Chief Secretary. Susan Jonko. She's excused. Josie Graham. Maria Kent. Steve Corbin. Steve Zastan. And Joe Cristiano. Here. All right. So, quick introduction, Nick Agnoli is our CRS consultant. He is also the engineer who has been heading up our response on the FEMA maps. And he's our resident FEMA and mapping expert, and he offered to help us out tonight. Just a quick background, the information that he's going to be reviewing is the responses we received from FEMA to a series of 6 questions that the Flood Advisory Board submitted back in April. We had a lot of resident questions, a lot of concern from board members also on how the new maps were impacting our insurance policies. We were getting multiple conflicting answers from FEMA and from insurance agents, so we went ahead and put together what we thought were the best representative set of questions, submitted them to Congressman Freeman-Heisen's office with the request that we get an answer in writing from FEMA to have it be something definitive. What we received back in July was a 7-page statement, which has been up on the website. That's what there's copies of, and it's very technical, and it's very complicated. So, Mr. Agnoli has offered to help us out with deciphering it and kind of translating it into something a little more understandable. So, Nick, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I've spoken with a lot of you before. Always happy to come to Pompton Lakes. It's a whole 10 minutes from my house on 287, so not a big deal. Yeah, I read the June 20 response from FEMA, and while technically accurate, it's extremely complicated. It's full of acronyms, and frankly, it comes across as contradictory, even though it is not. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to apologize to those of you who hate PowerPoint. This is your worst nightmare. It's tons of text, but there's a reason for it, and I'm going to highlight specific sections. So if you don't have a copy of the 6-page response is 6-page, 7-page response to the 6 questions posed by the Flood Advisory Board, I'd recommend that you either take a copy with you tonight or take a look on the website. Again, what is on there is technically accurate. I'm going to decipher it the best I can this evening, but I give a lot of credit to the Flood Advisory Board because the questions are well stated. And the 6 questions they asked are really the 6 that everybody in here needs to understand to protect yourself. Also, Liz, who's terrific, just gave me a copy of what was actually sent to her from FEMA that discusses a little bit about elevation certificates specifically. So when I finish tonight, if you have any questions about elevation certificates, please ask me, because the elevation certificate is the primary defense you have against changing rates. And the reason for that is the elevation certificate does nothing more. For those unfamiliar, before I even get into this, I want to just describe what an elevation certificate is. If you know this already, you can doze off for a bit. I'm pretty loud. You'll probably wake back up. It's 2 minutes, I promise, which is probably not true. Maybe 3. Elevation certificate is done by a professional land surveyor licensed in the state of New Jersey. If it isn't done by a professional land surveyor, it doesn't count. So what it is you contact, as I always recommend, the nearest survey firms, get 3 quotes. The closer they are, the cheaper it typically gets. You know, they tend to treat their own town well. So I would say, again, get 3 quotes locally. They tend to be between $400 and $800. And what they do is they verify, amongst many other things, your finished floor elevation. And the reason your finished floor elevation is so important is because that shows your insurer and FEMA how far above or below the base flood elevation line you are. So the BFE, or the 100-year line, the elevation certificate, while it has all these numbers all over it and diagrams, what it really is telling your insurance company is how bad off will you be during an event? How exposed is the insurance company to damages? They say, why do I want that? Well, if the insurance company doesn't have that, they assume the worst. So what will happen is let's say you get moved in, you get moved into the flood zone, right? You've never played flood insurance, now you have to. Well, minus an elevation certificate, the insurance company will say, well, we're going to assume you're getting 4+ feet of water on your first finished floor. That's a pretty tough assumption. At worst, an elevation certificate will confirm the insurance company's fears. At best, it will show you're out of the flood zone. The middle ground is, it'll just show you're not as bad off as the insurance company would assume you are. So just one more time, an elevation certificate, it's good because at worst, it'll show that it's the worst case scenario. At best, it'll show that you're out of the flood zone. And the middle ground is, it'll say, oh no, our finished floor is a foot above, or a foot below, or 2 feet below, or 2 feet above, but not the worst case scenario to FEMA. You know, you're 8 feet below the base flood elevation, you're going to maximum rate. Because minus an insurance company's understanding of your finished floor elevation, they will go to the worst rate. So that's my little 2-minute elevation certificate spiel. Now, what was sent to Liz, and probably sent to a lot of people in the room, it's got this kind of very simplistic diagram. It shows, arrows up and arrows down, and it's like the USA Today version of understanding elevation certificates. There's a seesaw and a house and a question mark. I don't know what any of these symbols are on here for, but it does get to the point, which is just option 1 is to do nothing, option 2 is to get an elevation certificate. And what will happen to anyone who has an increase, you have been capped under the newly revised changes to the flood insurance program at an 18% maximum per year increase, up to you hitting what the current rate is, all right? Now, your current rate will be set by your elevation certificate. So what that means is, with the elevation certificate, and we'll go into a lot more detail in a second, but just the basic news is, the elevation certificate instructs the insurance company over what your appropriate rate is, up to the maximum. Without an elevation certificate, your insurance company will increase you at 18% a year until you hit the worst possible rate. So again, huge proponent of elevation certificates. What has happened in other towns, Secaucus, New Jersey is for instance, they banded together a couple neighbors, and more neighbors, lower the price. They got it down to about $300 per person. So, kudos to them, and I think Bloomingdale's doing the same thing. Yes?
I had gotten the elevation certificate.
Okay.
He actually, the best case scenario, everything was above except for my garage floor, which was all good. I submitted it to FEMA, which is my insurance company, and they said, no, they still count the lowest level of my home as far as insurance goes, which is my basement, even though it's an unfinished basement right now. The only good thing is, like you said, there is a cap on it.
Yes.
Because I submitted it, but they're still charging me for the basement.
Yeah, basements are tough, because basements are counted as finished floors, and we can argue whether that's fair or not, but I know exactly what you're saying. You're like, you find out your finished floor, as you see it, which is your kitchen and your living room, are above, but then they're going down to that, they go 8 feet down to your...
Finished.
Right.
And then my insurance said, it's covered, basement's covered for finished contents and above. It's really not because it's a basement.
Right.
Even though it says it is, it's no, because it's below ground. So it's catch-22. They didn't cover it.
They're the...
Insurance, but they're charging you for it.
They're the friend that goes to you with Atlantic City, and if you win, they want to cut, but if you lose, they tell you too bad for you. Yeah, it's the analogy. If anyone here is a reporter, please don't print that. We're working on map appeals.
I've been in touch with the flood insurance advocate, and she explained to me that I said to her, when you sell a house, it's 1 floor range. She said, according to the flood insurance, 1 floor is a basement with a roof on it.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good when you do start at your basement, and you say, well, how do I get out of that? What has been done in other towns? I'm not advocating this, but what has been done. I've seen people move their utilities to their first finished floor, and fill the basement with sand. You know, and I know, you know, a lot of people are like, yeah, but I hate that idea. I'm not a proponent, or I'm not against it, but I know that has been done elsewhere. And that, again, I believe that was the caucus. DPW offered to bring sand in and fill basements, and they on one street they did that. Again, not advocating that. There are ways that we'll get into this as well. This is my short elevation certificate talk. There are ways to mitigate costs as well, in crawl spaces, for instance, you know, flood venting, you know, open vent systems and stuff like that. I'll talk about that in a minute. There's an online calculator where you're not going to go out and put all the vents in and find out it's done nothing for your insurance. There's actually an online calculator. If you have an elevation certificate and you have your insurance policy, you can populate the data fields and it will tell you if you're going to save any money from putting flood vents in, or engineered openings. So I'll show you that in a second. It's pretty neat, it's pretty easy to use. So again, for elevation certificate holders, it's a nice little extra tool to figure out if there's any benefit in any enclosure to venting it. Okay, yes?
If we find out that a person on our street who is elevated, say, 2 feet higher than the rest of the block, which is the case on our block, and they're told that the elevation certificate did not do anything in their favor, does it make any sense for the rest of us to have to get a certificate?
No, but I would be cynical. I'd be very skeptical that the elevation certificate wouldn't help anybody. That would mean everyone is way below the base flood elevation, or everyone has basements, and because of those basements, they're way below the base flood elevation. That was.
But it will still help you because of the tax.
And any of us who live in a flood zone, that basement.
Agreed, but it depends on where that flood line is versus the basement, because I'm very familiar with Pompton Lakes, having worked with the community rating system and the map appeal, and there are many sections where that flood line is below, you know, that flood line 3 feet above your finished basement floor, 5 feet above the finished basement floor. So there are cases in town. I'm not telling everyone to go out and run out and buy an elevation certificate. What I'm saying is it will never hurt you, and secondly, unless in your case, unless you have a neighbor who has a recent flood elevation certificate, and everyone's confident they are below that structure, then yeah, it's not worth their time to get one.
Okay, so I'm just wondering that twice already? If the basement already flooded twice in '84 and 2011, would that mean that we're below that level?
Yes.
So it wouldn't make any sense to get this certificate?
Correct. However, I would politely ask for a copy of that elevation certificate, and I would bring it, email me. I'll put my email address at the end, email me, because I want to take a look at the numbers. I just want to check it. Elevation certificates aren't filled out wrong sometimes. I would just want to see the numbers real fast, and I can compare it to the new BFE, the new base flood elevation. One thing I do want to talk about as we get into this presentation, the base flood elevations in town, with a couple local exceptions, haven't changed all that much. It's the floodway that has become much larger. On the insurance side, that has no impact. There are impacts, obviously, on the regulatory side. There's two cups in the state of New Jersey. They're both bad cups. You have the FEMA cup, which is your insurance. You have the other cup, which is DEP regulations as to what you can build in a floodplain and a floodway. The flood insurance is not affected by the floodway. FEMA insurance only sees 2 lines, the 2 sides of the floodplain. That's it. They don't care what's in the middle. They see 2 lines, and 2 blue lines in the map. They say between here and here, you have to have flood insurance. Floodway, floodplain, doesn't matter. The regulatory side in the state of New Jersey, what you're allowed to build, floodway has a large impact to the community. So everything I'm talking about tonight is insurance. So if I seem to be ignoring the phrase floodway, it's because for this conversation, it doesn't do anything. In fact, that's one of the questions, a good question that the FAB asked. You know, I've been told forever that floodway, floodplain doesn't make a difference. But it was nice for the flood advisory board to get that in writing from FEMA. So question 1. Okay, when 2015 maps are adopted, they have not been adopted, by the way. The 2015 maps are still in a holding pattern. Several properties that are currently not in a special flood hazard area will be moved into it. This is a question posed by the FAB. Some of these properties have logos removing them from the special flood hazard area or the 100-year floodplain on 2007 maps. Some are simply beyond the limits of the 2007 100-year plain. If these property owners have a current flood insurance policy and maintain continuous coverage, are they eligible for a preferred rate policy after the new maps are adopted? If so, how long does that preferred rate last? So the question is, this is really a grandfathering question. It's if I get moved in, okay, or I'm already in, how am I protected? The preferred rate policy, or preferred, it's actually preferred risk policy, that's going away. And I'm going to explain what it's getting replaced with. So the answer is grandfathering is not disappearing. There are protections, there are caps, there's a whole bunch of other things. So let's talk about that. What's PRP? So what used to be known as the preferred risk policy, that was the low-cost protection for people who were buying that were not in the floodplain. I had a property in Little Falls, New Jersey. In the greatest cosmic irony, I got moved into the floodplain. Civil engineer got moved into the floodplain after I researched. I picked the property because it wasn't in the floodplain, and I got moved in, which is hard to explain to your family. But yes, I was moved. It's not even funny, but I got moved into the floodplain, so I'm very sympathetic. Everybody in the room, trust me, I'm the most sympathetic ear you'll ever have from an engineer, because this happened to me. So I got moved in the floodplain, but right before, about 60 days before the maps were going to become effective, I bought the preferred risk policy insurance. So instead of paying $2,800 for $400, I had insurance on the property, so that when I got moved in, my insurance didn't change because I had a pre-existing insurance policy. So let's talk about that. Okay. What it says is, for those properties for which loans have been superseded, and for those who were outside the special flood hazard area, and will now be mapped in the special flood hazard area. So again, those who had letters of map amendment, and they're no longer valid because of changes in the base flood elevation. And for those that were outside the special flood hazard area, me, Little Falls, and got moved in, what happens? You're eligible for something called newly mapped. You're eligible for what's called a newly mapped policy or newly mapped procedure. Okay. The newly mapped rating procedure, and I'm going to read this straight off, and I apologize. Every word here is important. Gradually transitions policy for newly mapped properties to the full risk rates of standard rated special flood hazard area policies. So what that means is, now if you get moved in, you do go up to the full risk rate. However, unless you're a severe repetitive loss property, severe repetitive loss properties will go up to 25% a year. You're capped at a maximum of 18% a year. They're saying the average is closer to 15% per year. So the bad news is, yes, if you're formally out and you're now in, you will start ramping up from that old nice rate, that grandfather rate. You'll slowly ramp up. However, there's a positive however. However, if again the elevation certificate proves that you're just barely in, for instance, if you're right on that line and now you're on the other side of that line, you might be only a foot by elevation in, you might be a foot and a half in. So you only ramp up to that rate and then it stops. It'll go up 18% a year and then it'll stop. Because again, you'll have a lower rate insurance because you're barely in the floodplain. So that's why I talk about elevation certificates. What else?
I guess the question I have, why does it have to go up 18%? I mean, does it have to go up every year to 18%?
It's again an average of 15%. It's capped at 18%. So no, your flood insurance may not go up. The people whose flood insurance is going up are the ones who are getting moved into the floodplain. Okay, flood insurance rates all over the place are going up, but not that astronomically. The big hit is for the person who, I have never been in a floodplain. Now I am. Now.
But that's what I'm saying. And let's say it hasn't flooded in the next few years. You know, it still might go up anyway.
Yeah. The rates aren't really tied to like what's going on right now. You know, we get another Irene in 7 years. It'll go up a little bit, you know, to make the flood insurance program whole, but it's not that closely tied to it. What the rate increases really going on are a lot of the mapping changes. People are getting moved into the floodplain that have never been in it before, and they've gone from paying, like me, I had a preferred risk policy, now the newly mapped. So my $400 is now going up. You know, my $400 policy I had is now ramping up. Before you were protected. The way the program used to work prior to these changes, this is important, the way it used to work is, when I was moved in, I was protected, because I was a pre-firm policy. I was before we were mapped, but that's gone away. Now you do ramp up to everybody else, but it's capped at a percentage. Okay, so, yes?
Is this new mapping based on what happened in Irene?
No. No, Irene was only used for calibration purposes. All they used Irene, that's a really good question. The only thing they used Irene for was to take where they knew it flooded, versus what return period that rainfall was, okay? So let's say Irene was a 100-year storm. So they would say, okay, well, FEMA maps are supposed to be based on a 100-year storm. So they say, okay, where Irene went is about the confines of what the floodplain should be. They may have looked at it and said, no, Irene was more like a 90-year storm, we have to ramp it up a little bit. So no, Irene was only used to calibrate. It was not used as the basis for the new insurance. A lot of people think that that culvert there got clogged by a tree, so I flooded. It had nothing to do with Irene, it was because a tree blocked the culvert and now mapped. Little Falls, we had the same issue. It was, we wanted to make sure that they'd taken into account some of the systems were clogged. So the flooding had nothing to do with Irene other than the debris got carried and blocked a lot of stuff.
Well, I asked that question
Sure.
because I've lived in the house I'm living in now since I'm 1. Never.
25 years is a long time. That is a long time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyway, I've lived in that house since
I'll be 25 plus.
1, thank you.
Mhm.
Never in my entire life did we have water on the first living, the living floor. Yes, we've had water in the basement. We've had up to my neck in the basement. We've had only up to my ankle in the basement.
Was it groundwater in the basement, or was it water flowing in? Was it groundwater that came up, or was it water that came in from the sides?
Well, in Irene, it came in. I always open my windows. When there's a threat of a flood, the cellar windows get open.
That's very smart.
So it was, yes, coming in the windows, and it was coming up seepage to the base,
Yep.
to the basement floor. But until Irene, never, ever, ever was there water on the living floor.
Right. And so Irene, I studied extensively the Guanac River, which isn't that far, right?
But I'm 2.5 blocks away from the roundabout.
Okay. Yeah, because I studied the river over in Bloomingdale, so they were trying to figure, and it was about a 100-year event. It was between a 90 and 100-year event, Irene. So Irene was in our lifetime, 25 years, an extreme event, but it was about 100, approximately in this area of New Jersey. So when people say, I've never seen anything like it, that makes perfect sense. I believe everyone. When they say, I've never seen anything like it, we haven't. It beat the 1984 storm, it beat Floyd in 99. It was, the last one we had that was anything like this was 1903, the Patterson storm. Well, Hans, it was bad, right? Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Well, because the reason I'm saying.
We'll look at your photos later.
There's so many of us who live in my neighborhood, which I'm.
What street is it?
Harrelson Place.
Yep.
I'm the old timer in the neighborhood. Most of the people who live there now were not there. You know,
Right.
The 84, the 68. So I'm kind of like their liaison. What do we do? But
If you flooded with active flow, meaning the water came in through the sides, the mapping is accurate in that the water can get to the home, and that's
yes, it absolutely
right.
can, and it always did, even if we only had seepage from the floor.
Right.
But, I forget where I was going with my statement.
If you think of it, grab me later. I'm going to stay for a little bit. So I assume there's food after. Okay, good.
Oh, I know where I was going.
I'll stay all day.
That's what keeps you, we will definitely.
I'm Italian, so not hinting in any direction on the food.
I know where I was going with that, is the floodgates. We who live in my neighborhood all have said the same thing with Irene. In all the bad floods in this town, with just the natural falls,
Right.
never did we flood like this.
And we've never been challenged in this area like this. This has eclipsed anything. It was a flood record on most streams. There's never been anything quite like Irene. Locally, again, 1903 was bad, but that was a local, where Irene was just devastating to the entire state of New Jersey. Sandy hit the coast, Floyd hit West Milford, Sparta storm in 2000 hit Sparta, but Irene was just devastating to the entire state. So I think, agreed, it was absolutely unbelievable in terms of how bad the damage was, but it was a freak storm. It was a nor'easter that just ripped right through the state of New Jersey and didn't lose power until it got to Albany. Right? It just kept going too. That's the crazy part. They got 13 inches on one of the gauges up near Albany, which is, if you look at what's possible, that's considered what's called a probable maximum storm. And it was extreme. So let me finish getting through this. That doesn't mean that the map appeal is wrong, and that doesn't mean that individual owners are mapped incorrectly. So I do want to say that. I'm not being dismissive. If you said, look, Irene didn't get me, but the maps show them in, there are mapping errors. So we can talk about that as well at the end of this. So let me go here, because this is important also for grandfathering. How long must the policy be maintained continually to qualify for grandfathering? We have many homeowners in a situation outlined in question 1, we just talked about, we're willing to preemptively take out insurance policies, but not sure if it will help them financially. Check this out. This is super important. Okay, to be considered a grandfathered old policy, you need to have it 30 days before the new flood insurance rate maps become effective. The reason that's concerning is we still don't have a date that these maps will be effective, and I think that's something that the FAB will continue to keep you guys updated on, because that's a very important number, and I'll explain why the 30 days is so important.
I'm just going to enter. Is it typical or normal, or do we have any hope of a reasonable expectation that we might get a date more than 30 days in advance?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
that's my concern, is that we will find out if the
Oh, that's everyone's concern, yeah.
the day after they are effective, and that's not going to let residents prepare.
And honestly, that is a great thing to keep moving with the congressman on, and I wouldn't let up, because the expectation should be from the town that they get at least 90 days. Because what you don't want to do is have everyone scrambling for policies, because you want to be able to shop around, you want to be able to make sure you're informed, you might want to run out and get an elevation certificate. So before there's an onslaught of people trying to get policies, yeah, you need time, because you want to, again, cost assess, figure out what you want to do, write angry letters. Under the newly mapped procedure, they'll be able to renew their policies at the, okay. So, why are we even talking about grandfathering? What's the benefit? Well, here's the benefit of grandfathering. Let's say the base flood elevation in your specific area is going to change by, because a lot of areas the base flood elevation isn't changing. The topographic data that they're using is better, so that while the map outlines are changing, if you look at the actual base flood elevation, it's not changing much. Let's say before it was 150 feet above sea level, now it's 150.2. It's not a big change, right? But the map, you were like, well, why is the mapping changing so much? Well, they have better data now as to where the land surface is. Okay, that's part of it. However, let's say it is going to change. Let's say you go, no, I spoke with the town, and it's going up 4 feet by me. So why would I want to do something like this? Because if you're grandfathered, you are tied to the old base flood elevation, not the new one. And that's a very important change. So if the base flood is changing dramatically by you and you do not have insurance, that level of protection could be huge. Because if the base flood elevation is going up 3 feet at your house, if you run out and buy a policy, and 90 days later the effective maps come out, you're tied to the old base flood elevation, not the new one. Okay, just a very important clarifier. And that, I guess, you're talking about how the letter's kind of hard to follow. It gets completely lost in the letter, but that's very important.
So if you, and I'm going to use my own property as an example on that, it's going up 18 inches by me.
Okay.
So I'm going from being not quite 2 feet under to being almost 4 feet. Now, I have an existing policy, but that policy is going to then bring up that 18%, or I'll say, family member's house, that's going from being out to going in. He's going to have to have his policy in place. He's preferred risk that he's grandfathered, but after that 12 months of that rate, his rate's 500. After that first year of 500, then it's going to go up at 18%.
Let me read the example. This actually speaks right to that question. Okay, let's say, Lauren, this is your house right there. You can put your name right there. You bought after, anyways, well, why after 1974? That's when the National Flood Insurance Program mapped the town. Okay, so it was built after 1974. It was built in compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program minimum standards. You've had a flood insurance policy on that house since you moved in. You've always maintained coverage. The structure will continue to be rated based on the elevation difference between the lowest floor elevation of the structure and the BFE at the time of construction. So what that means is, if the map changes, your rate does not go up. You've had coverage the whole time. Your rate should not change.
That's only for post-firm
Yes.
construction, that's the fund, which is not regarded by residents.
Correct. Correct.
They're almost all pre-firm.
Yep. This is for structures built after 1974. But again, this is the stuff that Laura, that's what's happy to talk to you guys. This is the stuff that got so lost in that letter. There's just way too many numbers and figures. But this little piece right here is important. So anybody here with a newer home, okay? if you have flood insurance coverage and you've kept it since you've had it, you have continuous coverage with the National Flood Insurance Program, your will be held to the old mapping. The mapping changes do not affect you if you're already in. If you're out of, yes, you're getting moved in, and what happens is that previous one we just talked about. You can ask tons of questions. It's good for you to go.
On my house, I only had flood insurance since I leave, because I was forced to get it. Now with this new mapping and this elevation thing, my rate will change?
Your rate will change, yes. If the elevation's changing in your specific neighborhood, if in Harleston Place it's going up, the elevation, base flood elevation is changing, your insurance can go up by probably about a foot or more. If it's a foot or more, you'll see a rate change. But it will only be to get you to that difference in the base flood elevation. So it shouldn't be a huge increase, for instance. We use a foot. The base flood elevation is going up by a foot, they'll increase your flood insurance accordingly. Yes?
What have you been here for 30 years in a pre-firm? You've been paying?
If you've been here, if your house was pre-1974,
Yeah.
right, and you don't get this grandfathering exclusion, okay? If the home was built prior to 1974, you're not protected under this. If you're getting moved in,
No, I've been here.
okay, so, that's a good one. Okay, so you've always been in, you're pre-firm,
You've been paying for 30 years.
the grandfathering doesn't protect you because of this little disclaimer right here.
It's the year it was built, right?
Yes?
Not how long you've been in.
No, here it's going.
So the issue of the house, not the current owner. So if someone who owns your house prior, it's an issue of the house.
Yes.
itself, Not, yeah. So I would say probably just about everybody in this room. is-
Well, like, mostly 1950s, yeah.
Yeah. Our question. We've been living on a home for 10 years. We've always been, in flood zone 8. For some reason, there's never been a clean file, never had water, basement, we are a home anywhere.
What street is it?
Walnut Street. And, we just not sure if there's any action to try and, fight why are we paying this insurance? Never had any.
If and as I said, Irene was about a 100-year event. If Irene did it get into your yard? Did it get,
I said 100 years ago. They're nothing, right?
the water didn't come anywhere near the house?
No.
And you're now mapped in the flood zone?
We've been in the flood zone A since 1987.
Okay.
There's never been a clean file here.
Trying to think about it. There's no short way to explain it, but I do want to talk about what flood zone A is. Just start with an engineer, guys, I'm sorry. But since food's coming, we're all going to eat together. Zone A versus Zone AE, what's the difference? Why we're all getting mapped as the AE zone? Okay, Zone A means it was estimated mapping. They didn't come up with any flood elevations. Zone A is very much like it sounds. They would just estimate an area that would be flooded, and a lot of people would contest those, but to contest it, unfortunately, there was an expense, because you have to hire an engineer like myself that would have to figure out what the real depth is, and it was a bit of work. So you say, well, why am I, it's probably wrong. Most A zones are incorrect. I did the appeal in Bloomingdale. 125 homes in Bloomingdale came out. Because I go engineering, a little company went in and we mapped the whole thing. We mapped the entire Oakwood Lake Brook section of Bloomingdale, and FEMA didn't push back. It hadn't never been properly mapped. Went in, we mapped the whole stream, 125 homes came out. There was one section where the vertical error was 20 feet. It was off by 20 feet vertically. And you'd say, well, how can they make such an error? Because a lot of the mapping done in 78, 79, and 80, when a lot of these maps became effective, they were estimated maps. Zone A is an example. Anybody here familiar with Glen Wild Lake? Glen Wild Lake was Zone A. They just drew a line around it and said, all right, everything within the line is in the flood zone. When we looked at it, we found that was completely incorrect. All those homes around it would never get hit by that lake. It just wasn't going to go up that high. So that's the unnecessarily long answer to your question. It's because Zone A is estimated, and if you truly believe that it's wrong, and there's no way it should be in the flood zone, it is definitely worth it for you to hire a local engineer to have them take a look and evaluate your case, because it's a good chance of you getting a loan. you have a very strong argument for a LOMA in a Zone A. A letter of map amendment. What that means is, you're not trying to re-study the entire area. In your particular spot, there is no way that water can get to you. And that's a letter of map amendment. The letter of map amendment itself is free from FEMA because you're a residential owner, okay? The only charge is to hire an engineer to come in and do an evaluation local to you as to how high the water can get. And that's become more and more common because when the new maps came out, people who never paid attention to them before said, well, I don't want to pay money for flood insurance. You know, and because of Irene, you actually had something to base your claims against. You could say, wait a second, if Irene, and this is why Bloomingdale approached my company, because Bloomingdale said, look, we just went through Irene, and we've got tons of homes, 100 homes that didn't even get wet. The water didn't even get near the houses. So that's another thing. Anyone in this room, if you have been moved into the flood zone, okay, whether floodlight, flood traders, doesn't matter, and during Irene, the water, you looked out your window and there's no water to be found, you should definitely be contacting a local engineer to talk about a letter of map amendment. Because that is an absolute strong case to be in, because Irene was near the 100. And the modeling should show what you saw, if it's done properly. Yes?
So, I have a question now. So, a lot of these things before what we're talking about is how much the rates are going up, and then
Yes.
these caps, right? But when I called FEMA and asked, well, just tell me what the maximum rate is, right? I don't have an relationship, right?
Right.
Just tell me what's the worst case scenario, because we bought the house 4 years ago, and my flood insurance was $3,600. Now it's $6,200, right? Well, needless to say, that's not good.
That's
right?
horrible.
The question is, well, next year it's going to go up 25% or 18%, whatever it's
Yep.
going to be. It's going to be $7,500. It's going to go on until when? Until it's more than my taxes? Like, I need to know. Because,
And they wouldn't give you a maximum rate?
you know, they told me that they won't give a maximum rate without the elevation certificate.
Well, I
Yeah.
got no reason to get them to do
You could just
it.
Just make up make one up, just tell them, just make up a number on the elevation certificate. No, I would say, your insurance company does have the max rates. Just contact your insurance company, they know what they are.
Yeah, they told me, there's no, without
The insurance company wouldn't give you?
yeah, well, it's all through FEMA, you know?
Just tell them you're shopping, just contact the local, what I do.
A lot of people in Pompton Lakes following Irene specifically had their private insurers told out, refused to insure them, and they were transferred to NFIP. So many of us are, if you're a severe repetitive loss in.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, yes, yeah, SRL, you're NFIP.
You're only through NFIP, and it becomes much more difficult on the customer service
Yes,
level
yes.
to get any kind of information. Now, I don't know.
Yeah, I should have asked that, I'm sorry. So you're SRL or
They consider the property to be that. You know, when we bought it, in the process, they gave us a list of all the claims, and basically, one large claim during
Yeah.
Irene, and then
One other claim.
$1,000,
Yep.
4 years before, $4,000, 10 years before that, like little spots, but enough to say, hey, there's been multiple claims, right?
Yeah.
So it's considered that, so the only option we were given was through the National Flood Insurance Program. And then when, you know, the rates keep going forever, we try and get well, tell me what the maximum is, and then we'll tell you what the maximum is. Well, is it 10,000, is it 20,000, is it 30,000? Like, it makes a difference.
And
At some point,
they wouldn't-
won't be able to afford it anymore.
At the end, I have my email address up, email me, because what I do have the rate tables. I can take a look and see what the max rate would be for your particular neighborhood, that's no problem.
Excellent, thank
New
you.
Jersey manufacturers won't tell me either. And they're getting out of it.
Yeah.
It's so peculiar. The tables are available.
Be a cap.
They should have, they're supposed to, yeah.
Told you there's a cap. He said, good news is since you submitted your certificate, there will be a cap.
So without an EC, they won't even give you the maximum? Because there are maximum rates.
I was told by more than one agent no. So, I mean, I've been getting quotes for it, but then when he got the letter about this meeting,
Yeah,
so I'd come today before paying the money for the certificate.
Email me, I'll get you an answer, and then we'll strip your name and house location off it. I'll send it to Lauren so she can circulate the answer to everybody.
Thank you.
Because that's ridiculous. They're published rates. And the NFIP is not a secret, it goes through Congress.
And those rates would go by base flood elevation, basically?
Yeah.
So.
But there is a maximum. The point is, if you don't have an elevation certificate, like I said, I'm a big fan of elevation.
There's a worst case scenario.
Right.
So if the worst case scenario is 8 feet under, then I just want to know.
Take my house, what do I pay? No, I know what you're saying, because there are maximum rates. There absolutely are. And that's why I'm a big fan, that's why I'm a huge fan of elevation certificates, because for the $800, you at least have peace of mind that you're not overpaying. And that's why I like BEC, because you'll know, no matter what you're being quoted, you're not paying more than you have to, because you've told them what your finished floor elevation is, so it's not a guess anymore. They know exactly how much you should be paying. It's not always good news. Sometimes you're paying the right amount, but it's never, you should pay more. Because if they have no elevation certificate, you're paying max. Property owners in a situation, question number 3 from the FAB. Property owners in situations referenced in question 1 are currently paying 1/4 to 1/8 the premiums paid by similar homes within the special flood hazard area. On a percentage basis, what's the rate increase? We've already answered this, but it's good to go over it again. For policy, on a newly mapped property, the initial rate premium is approximately equal to the PRP rate. What that means is, when you suddenly switch from that old PRP system, that preferred rate, right, and you move over to newly mapped, it's the same for the first year. It doesn't change. The first year, it stays the same. And then you start moving up to 18%, a maximum of 18% a year, averaging 15%. Again, those of us who move in, already having a policy, that's your increase. Again, those are people moving in. Next question from the FAB. Many homeowners whose property is currently in the special flood hazard area will see their base flood elevations rise considerably. I'm like, some, let's not be too crazy. We have some people moving in. How does this impact the insurance premium? For example, for pre-firm policyholders currently 1 foot below the BFE, but now be 3 feet below the BFE, should they expect an increase in premium, and by what range? Does this impact SRL and RL properties differently? Let's talk about that. Pre-firm structures are not rated, and again, pre-firm structures weren't rated with elevation data. They just were given a reduced policy amount. It was, $400. Didn't matter what there was no need for an elevation certificate. My house in Little Falls, pre-firm, it didn't matter. It was $400. They didn't ask for an elevation certificate. I wasn't in the mapped area. So pre-firm, so pre-1974 homes, like we talked about before, it's the same answer. It doesn't go up. However, yes. So, let me move on to the next slide. It's the same answer. Oh.
Can you go back just one for a second?
Yep. Doesn't want to go back.
This is what most of us are here. So we're pre-firm structures. Many of us do not have elevation data. So, okay, I understand. So the pre-firm data, because it's not set by what your elevation actually is. If I can have an elevation certificate on file, I'm 2 feet below, I'm going from 2 feet below to 4 feet below. If they don't have an elevation certificate for me, they don't know that I'm only 2 feet below. So it doesn't matter. I'm still paying essentially the subsidized version of the max rate anyway.
Right, and this is what this is saying. And we talked about this before. That's why I shouldn't have skipped it. Because this is the most confusing part of the whole thing. It's I have a pre-firm structure, okay, which is a lot of people here, okay, and I have subsidized rate. Okay. My premium change is not because of the change in the base flood elevation, okay? Because, like I said, because you're going to be tied to the original base flood elevation. You're tied to the old BFE. So the change to the BFE doesn't impact you if you're pre-firm, okay? Which a lot of people here are. So if tomorrow, Lauren, if tomorrow your house, you find out you're 3 feet higher in elevation, the new maps are like, oh my God, the new map shows 3 feet higher. No, you will not see a change because of that. However, if you are paying just $400 and you get moved in, you will increase it 5 to 18% until you hit the new risk rate.
In this situation, does a pre-firm structure benefit from an elevation?
Yes. Yes, because the old rules have gone away. You're going to now pay up to the BFE. You're locked into the old base flood elevation. You've always paid flood insurance. You're locked into the old base flood elevation. But you're ramping up to that new number. That new number is set by elevation certificate. The elevation certificate protects you from them going, Lauren, look, the old 400 is gone, we're gonna ramp you up to the new rate, so we don't know, plus 8 feet. You're 8 feet, you're like, well, 8 feet, give me a break. There's no way it's 8 feet over my first finished floor. I think that's a cap, by the way, I think it's 8 feet over your first finished floor.
Preferred people, which is most of us,
Mhm.
will still most likely benefit from the elevation
Yes.
certificate. But even though we are pre-1974, we're still tied to 2007 PFD.
That's correct.
As long as our policies have been maintained.
Yes.
How do you know if your policy's been maintained continually, like from being on the property, not me personally, right? So how do I know if the owners before me did that?
The NFIP maintains that data, so when you contact the NFIP to talk insurance, you can, that's the most basic question they have to be able to answer, which is, do I qualify for this? Because that's how they're gonna set your rate, yes.
Another question about my house. Since I've never had flood insurance until Hurricane Irene, do I fall into any of this?
Yeah, what happened, right now, you were outside the floodplain before?
No, we were always in it.
Oh, is it? Okay. If there's going to be a map change with a map elevation, the elevation's gonna change, it goes, let's say it's going up in your street, this is what you want to check. It's gonna go up, you would benefit from having flood insurance, okay?
Which I do.
Because you're not gonna suffer because of the change in elevation. That's not gonna impact you. You had it 30 days before the map change, you're locked into the old base flood elevation. So yes, there's confusion over contiguous.
Only if I have that certificate.
Correct. There's confusion over the benefits of having a pre-existing policy before the effective date. The benefit is pretty good, because if that map change impacts you, up, down, whatever, having that policy 30 days before that happens does protect you from that change, the elevation change.
No matter if you're firm or not.
Doesn't matter.
But what if you were pretty firm, structured, but you never flood? Then how would that impact your, should you get flood? Should you get an elevation?
Are you outside the floodplain? Or you're in the floodplain?
It's kind of on the property, only the property.
Oh, there's no house? Oh, the water gotcha. It takes, it's getting late, I'm hungry. So, there is a house, the property got flooded, but the house didn't get flooded during Irene, and they pay flood insurance.
They don't, I didn't vote for
They should just enjoy their life and continue on. If they didn't flood during Irene, and the property got wet, their house didn't get wet, and the new maps show them in, the old maps showed them in, and they don't pay flood insurance? They have a mortgage? All right, I'm with you.
There's no more.
So, get this right. They have no mortgage, and then they'll never have to pay it. Tell them to enjoy life. Go to Quick Check on Sundays and life's good. Ignore everything I'm saying. That's what you can tell them. They heard it. Okay, now everyone else. So this is post-firm people. Elevation certificate. It's required for post-firm construction and a special flood hazard area. I know most of you here are pre-firm, but those of you who are post-firm, I definitely want an elevation certificate. If a policyholder is, and this is an example here, if a policyholder is currently rated 1 foot below the base flood elevation, they can remain at that rate even if the new map places them 3 feet above due to continuous coverage grandfathering. So the continuous coverage grandfathering is for that. It's for when this happens. It has nothing to do with this. It's this. That's the old grandfathering they talk about. That's the big, it's so confusing in the letter. That's the difference. Grandfathering is up and down. Everything else is inside, outside. Thanks, Grandpa.
Where can I find my BFD right now for 2015 flood map?
Email me your address. I'll look it up for you.
We also have on the borough website,
Oh, is it up there?
under the borough maps tab on the homepage, you can go into a map where you can enter your property
Yeah, that comes
address
up.
and check off what you want. You can check off the
Okay.
emergency maps is down there.
Oh, your print over too. A lot of this stuff is on the website. A lot of stuff's on the website because of Liz here. Liz is very modest, but I'm gonna give a little shout out. A lot of the cool FEMA stuff is on the website thanks to Liz.
This is wonderful.
Too late. I've already given compliments. Too late. Sorry, Lauren, should I have eaten more? Perhaps I'd be more happy to give you some credit. But you get, no, I'm sorry. All right. Now, let's talk about enclosures. This is the other huge one that usually impacts just about everybody. It's, well, what happens if I have an area below base flood elevation that I can't move, a basement, for instance. My basement floor is going to be where it's been for the last 60 years. It's not going to change. Now, let's read through this carefully, because on the next page, I'm going to tell you what you do with all this. NFIP rules state that an enclosure below the lowest floor of the post-firm elevated building in any flood zone, beginning with the letter A or AE, must have proper openings and be unfinished to be considered compliant and receive the most favorable rate available to the building. So, if you are unfinished, okay, and you are vented, meaning water is allowed to get in automatically, you don't have to open anything, it's vented, water just comes in. Now, for rating purposes, if an enclosure is unfinished, used solely for building access parking, storage, blah, 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 you'll get a more favorable rate. So these are kind of two different ones. So before you run out though and start knocking holes through walls and putting in flood vents, I recommend you go to yourfloodrisk.com, and if you have an elevation certificate, you can enter in the information and it will tell you, they'll even tell you your rate policy, they'll even tell you the cost change. They'll say, you know, the vents are going to cost X and you're going to save this much per year. It's a very, very handy calculator, because it'll tell you if there's any benefit to venting your basement. There's a lot of basements that's just not going to make any difference. It doesn't help you in any way. So, I'm not going to, one thing I'll never do is, as a licensed engineer, is try to figure out right now if you benefit from venting. One, I don't work for them, and two, I don't want to sell you wrong. 'Cause I would never want to see a homeowner put 4 vents in, spend $1,600, and you come back to me and say, Nick, my policy didn't change at all. It's very dependent on your elevation certificate. It's very dependent on your policy. I'm not even going to scenarios. We've been told several times that the floodway designation will not increase insurance premiums. This will be confirmed. That was confirmed in writing. So again, anybody here who's getting moved into the floodway can breathe easy on the flood insurance premiums. However, if you want to do any modifications to your structure, that's a different story, which is why I'm involved in the fight on the floodway issue, because the way the new floodway is being calculated, it's very large. It's very, very large. It's in areas going from, relative terms, 400 feet wide to 2,000 feet wide. Now, the floodway along the Ramapo has become massive. You know, it pretty much takes up the lower half of the town, the floodway. So that fight will continue. It is now, the fight is now with the DEP. Okay, question 6, last one. Many severe federal loss residents have received notices from FEMA encouraging them to obtain elevation certificates for the properties. The letters state that the insurance premiums will continue to rise at high rates. For properties without an elevation certificate, residents are reluctant to spend the money on a surveyor for an EC when, as SRL property, they are well aware that the property is within the special flood hazard area. If the property is known to be within the SFHA, or the 100-year flood area, based on location and depth of water during flood events, how does an EC benefit the resident? And will obtaining an EC on these properties actually reduce the rate of increase? I'm going to answer the bottom first. It won't change the rate of increase. The rate of increase on an SRL property is 25%. That's by federal regulation. However, it can change the cap. And that's what I'm going to keep harping on about elevation certificates. The only thing elevation certificates do for you, other than potentially proving you're not in the flood zone, I don't want to forget that. It might prove you're not in the flood zone at all. If you were not flooded during Irene, the EC may show simply that you're not in the flood zone. However, at worst, it will show that they're accurate. At best, it'll show you're out. And that middle ground is, it will show what the cap should be. Because remember, the ramping up is set by regulation. The cap is set by your elevation certificate. Or minus that, it's maximum. Okay? So, that's my answer all over the place. So, that's the 25%, we just talked about that. The next one says, pre-firm subsidized policies for all the structures and current annual rate increase is 5%, not to exceed, at least 5%, excuse me, not to exceed 18, until full risk is achieved. So, that's non-SRL. And the last one, it says, because full risk rating requires a comparison of, I wrote it better than I said it. Because full risk rating requires a comparison of the elevation of the lowest floor used for rating with the DFE in order for property owners to determine their current full risk rate. They eventually will need to obtain an EC. So the elevation certificate is the only way you know that the max rate you're ramping to is correct. Without an elevation certificate, you are ramping toward a rate that may be wrong. Yes?
I think you said it before, I just want to make sure I'm good. So you said that if we already had an existing policy, we're tied to the 2007 map.
Yes.
It's continuous.
Yes.
So as long as when I find out, that the previous owner or something like that, right? It doesn't matter if I get the elevation certificate before or after the
No.
existing map.
No.
It just matters that eventually I need to get it to go for that.
Yeah, that's it, and I'm gonna kind of just stick on that point for a minute. Yeah, the elevation certificates, which is why I'm a huge fan of neighbors calling each other up and saying, let's just get them together, because the rate does drop significantly. Because the way the elevation certificates are developed, the initial expense to the surveyor is high in terms of time. Because what they'll do is they have to come out, they have to establish a vertical elevation, right? They have to come out, they gotta figure out, this table right here, what elevation is that? Well, right now, there's no benchmark that the surveyor can use in this room. They're gonna go down the street and find one, or if there isn't one, create one, and then come all the way back to this table and set the elevation. That might be a full day's worth of work. However, if there's 10 tables in this room, it's another 5 minutes. And that's the benefit of having a surveyor work on multiple houses, because once they've established this elevation right here, me establishing every elevation on every chair in this room is quick. I just walk around real fast with the survey rod, and I'm done in a half an hour. And I can start cranking out elevation certificates. So when you hire a surveyor to do an elevation certificate, you're paying for them to do that whole process. When your neighbor hires them with you, there's a lot of negotiating power there, because they don't have to do anything again other than survey the back door, they're going to survey the front door, they're going to go around the house, look for the lowest adjacent grade, they're going to survey the basement, they're going to survey, that's the difference. They're going for flood vents, stuff like that. The time on the next house might be a half an hour, the time of the first house might be 6 hours.
Just to build on that, we request at the July meeting to have our council liaison that we asked their council negotiations and how the town should facilitate neighbors organizing on that. So we are trying to help a little bit with getting that organized. I know one board member did work with his neighbors and was able to get a much reduced rate because you go individually.
So, like I said, just use the town I know. I mean, it cut the rate by like 60% in one town that tried it.
They charged me $450, and you said, if I got like 3 neighbors, it went down to $300.
And $450 is a very good deal. $450 is very, very good.
And nobody wanted to do it.
So we paid $450?
Oh. Well, you know what? Next time neighbor has a problem, you just lock your door and hide. Okay, you're not home.
At the last council meeting,
Yes.
this issue was discussed, and we have asked the borough administrator, Kevin Boyle, to please make some inquiries to local surveyors to put them on notice that we have neighbors that might be looking to band together. I don't have an answer for you yet.
Okay.
It just happened, and he's in the process of doing the research, but it was brought up because you had shared with us that, in fact, the more they do, the cheaper they.
Yeah, it's a substantial drop in price.
So, he's not here this evening.
Okay.
I don't know which surveyors he contacted at this point, but I'll speak to him tomorrow and remind him that.
Some of the best around are right around here, actually. You guys position-wise, you guys are in a really good location for survey. A lot of the better surveyors are right around here. I'm not making recommendations. Anybody you call locally is pretty good. All the ones around here are pretty good. And I know they've worked with Bloomingdale on something similar to that, like trying to get reduced rates for multiple owners. And I think the Glen Wild Lake community, I think they did it as well. I think they banded with, I don't mind mentioning, that was DMC is the name of the survey company they used up there. They all got together. And John Mafalski, I think, worked with them, local engineer, real good. He worked with DMC, I think, to do reduced rates for that whole area. And yeah, it was, because some of the numbers, because they're in such high demand, some of the numbers are getting pretty high on these elevation certificates. I've heard numbers close to $1,000, and it's just, case in point, the number I just heard now is exactly what I heard before, $300 if you get more than one person to do it. That's great. That's a huge reduction in cost. And the elevation certificate's good for as long as you don't change the structure.
Since you seem to say you can't technically identify them, but you said around here, which communities, which towns do these reputable service.
Oh, no,
I use one in Butler.
Butlers, yeah, I was gonna say Butlers,
DNC.
yeah.
That's one I use.
Yeah, they're, and again, I'm not advocating DMC, they are close, they are by far the most, I think, community oriented, because their prices are the rock bottom, and their work's real good. I've used them as a licensed engineer for work before on stream studies, all over Bloomingdale, in Pompton Lakes as well, Wayne, all over the place. And they've been very, very reasonable, and I think not taking advantage of a good market for elevation certificates. They seem to keep their prices down,
I pay $5.50.
except now. It was one, it was a standalone. Yeah, it's $5.50, believe it or not, $5.50 is still very competitive. Yeah, DMC. DM, like the rap group, I guess, DMC. Yeah, Dharma, no, it's, the DMC,
Is that even that?
For over 2 years. And the gentleman was in the back running that, he said to me, I don't know how they could build a house that shows that it's in the middle of a stream. But the house is 60 years
is that an extra
old.
copy?
Yes. I was gonna, if I could email it to you or whatever.
The good news is that's all I have. So, that's it. Again, and I always say, please email me, but I really mean it. Like, if you email me, I'll try to respond. I get a lot, I do this in 12 towns, so I got a lot of inquiries, so I'm not ignoring you. If I take a week, I will absolutely get back to you, though. It's just, yeah, it's been crazy, because of everyone, rightfully so, is concerned. So I get at least 10 requests a day for just stuff like this, and I'll get an elevation certificate.
Do you just want to see the first page, or you want it all?
The whole thing, please.
I got a question. Why do they have to do the survey that way? Why can't they just use GPS? Just take a read.
They'll establish a GPS mark, but that does take a while. You know, what they can do also is, you know, stand out in the middle of the street, set a GPS point, you know, just put an X mark on a curb and then run the line in. They can use GPS, but getting a GPS point set does take a while. It's not instantaneous. I've done it. It takes a while.
Yeah.
It's not 6 hours. You know, it cuts it down to an hour, and then they go and do their survey. But the point is still the same. If they've established that mark, you know, X a manhole, X a fire hydrant, whatever, and they can just run the whole street. That's when it gets cheap. It's when you just house to house to house to house get the same information. Just put your dogs inside, that's all.
Nick, I have a question. You mentioned benchmarks. I'm under the impression that the Army Corps of Engineers has set benchmarks.
There are some, yes. There's a project.
Is that what would be used by?
Yeah, I don't want to confuse it too much. 'Cause I think Pompton Lakes even has a series of benchmarks. Bloomingdale does, I know, as well. The communities around here, Bloomingdale has a ton, so they can even tie in from there and come down. Oakland has some. There's a stability rating that they have to use. So if the benchmark was set, for instance, on a curb, you can't use it. If the benchmark was set on a massive series of library stairs, they'll accept that. If it's set on a bridge abutment, they'll accept that. So it depends on where the Army Corps set the benchmark. There's a stability rating from A to D, and as long as it's an A or a B stability, meaning that object should never move, it's deep enough, it's large enough, it should not move much, they can use the benchmark. So yeah, a federal benchmark, whether it's Army Corps, USGS, NGS, any of the federal agencies, can be used. It just has to be qualified by the land surveyor as being stability A or B. And those, believe it or not, all those are online. If you, NGS, National Geodetic Survey.gov, all these, this is the cool stuff I do in my free time. NGS, you can figure out where the benchmark is near your house right online. But the surveyor will do that exact search. The surveyor will go online and see if there's a nearby benchmark, and if not, to the point raised before, they'll just use GPS instead. It's faster if there's a benchmark right down the street, they'll just run it in from there. If there's none, they'll use GPS to set a couple points and then start doing their house. But yeah, GPS it's not instantaneous, it takes a while.
If there's any other questions for Nick? All right, so thank you. Very,
All
very.
right. Okay.